college football preview, philsteele.com. We feature Phil every single week on the show as we preview the top college and pro games. We'll have the pro preview coming up with Phil in a few weeks and have him in for that. And then we'll get week by week handicapping from Phil, and he's the best in the country, and we're privileged to have him. Big 12 South. Texas, you talked about a little bit already. But I know you like those Sooners.
Yes, I do. And, you know, I've been fortunate in the magazine. We've cashed 7 straight Big 12 South winners. So I've had a great pulse for how the Big 12 South goes. And, you know, when I picked Oklahoma, I picked them not only #1 in the South this year, I picked them #1 in the country. And the one thing that's taken me by surprise this year is how much people are surprised at the fact that I picked Oklahoma because they lost 5 games last year. Well, I have a litany of reasons.
Expecting you to take an SEC team?
An SEC team or somebody that didn't lose 5 games last year.
And they lost Bradford, too, though.
Well, Bradford didn't play last year.
Yeah, that's true.
They lost Gresham.
They lost
Gresham didn't play.
They lost him twice, as a matter of fact.
So, I mean, these guys weren't playing last season. That's part of it. But let me give you just a litany of reasons. This is my pick for #1 in the country. I go pretty in-depth here, and I just don't throw picks out, as you know. I have reasons upon reasons upon reasons. Now, first of all, can a team with 5 losses win the national title? I'll ask you, Bruce, how many times this past decade did a team with 4 or more losses win the national title out of the 10 years? 4 times, 40% of the time, yes. Now, 2 years ago, I made a shocking pick. Georgia was the preseason #1 by everybody. Everybody had Georgia won. They were #1 in the AP poll. I took a team from the same division, Florida, that lost 4 games the previous year and had lost to Georgia by double digits. People are like, is this guy crazy? But Tim Tebow and company had a lot of reasons behind it. They delivered me the national title 2 years ago. I'm banking on the same thing here. So 4 times this past decade, a team with 4 more losses won the national title. Now, let's look at Oklahoma as far as the statistics last year go. They were the best team in the Big 12 statistically. They outgained Big 12 foes, despite their 5-3 record in Big 12 play, by 133 yards per game. That was almost 50 yards more than Texas. So I'm taking a team here statistically that was the best team, and I always look at teams statistically as well as the final record. Now, the next category to look at is starts lost to injury. In 2007, Utah led the nation in starts lost to injury, and they lost 5 games that year. The next year, they got a lot of those injured players back, a lot of players that gained experience that didn't expect to gain experience. All Utah did was go 12-0. They played some team named Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. They won that game, and they earned votes for #1 at the end of the season. That's what happens when you lose a lot of starts to injury. Oklahoma, 42 starts last year lost to injury, so they were a very beat-up team. Then I look at the close win, close loss factor. Going back to Alabama, as I mentioned with Notre Dame, they were a team 2 years ago, in 2007, I should say, that lost 6 games, but all 6 losses by 7 points or less. 6 plays away from being unbeaten. Well, let's look at Oklahoma's losses last year. Opening game of the season, you play BYU. You lose your starting quarterback, Sam Bradford, in the last play of the second quarter. Here's Landry Jones, a redshirt freshman. I'm expected to carry the clipboard all year. Doesn't get reps with the first string in the spring. Doesn't get them in August. You have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, for crying out loud. Go play, Landry. They miss a couple of field goals. They lose the game by 1 point. A few weeks later, they play Miami of Florida on the road. Now, Miami of Florida is a great athletic defense, and they're playing them in the heat, humidity of Miami, a rabid crowd. What a first road start for any redshirt freshman quarterback, let alone somebody that's just starting to get reps with the first string. Oklahoma outplayed them the majority of the game. They came up 1 point short. And once again, change 1 play, it's a win. Then the Texas game. Now, I told you I've picked the Big 12 South winner 7 straight years. Last year, I was a Texas fan. I had my Longhorn hat on while I'm watching my 12 TVs because I needed Texas to win the game. I had Texas playing in the national title game last year. And Bradford goes down on the second series of the game. I'm like, it's easy. Got this game easy. Third quarter, why is Oklahoma outplaying us? Fourth quarter, why is Oklahoma outplaying us? Oklahoma outgained my team by 50 yards. At the end of the game, I escaped with a 3-point win. And I go, oh, my goodness, that was a close one. Why did Oklahoma outplay us so bad like they did? Then a few weeks later, Oklahoma plays Nebraska, has a 23-7 first down edge. Just dominate the game. They lost by 7 points because of -4 in turnovers. Now, those are 4 games. You basically change 1 play, and they're a 12-1 team last year. At the end of the year, they did lose to Texas Tech, but that was an Oklahoma team that came in preseason #3 at the start of the year, had lost 4 games. You sort of lose your motivation a little bit, and Mike Leach likes to roll it up. Now let's look at the talent. Last year, the reason I picked Texas over Oklahoma Oklahoma's offensive line. They had one starter back. They had one of the most inexperienced offensive lines in the country, and then they went through 10 different starting lineups. Well, their points per game went from 51 points per game down to 31 points per game. 31 is still pretty good, but not up by that 51 level. This year, they've got a much more veteran offensive line, and they're not going to go through 10 different starting lineups. They don't have a redshirt freshman anymore. They've got Landry Jones, who threw for 3,000 yards last year. They got one of the best running backs receiver groups in the country. In fact, there's only 4 teams in the country that rank in my top units in the front of the magazine in all 8 categories. They're the only one that ranks in the top 8 or the top 16 in all 8 categories. They're loaded in every single position, offense, defense, and special teams. And then look at the schedule.
Let me interrupt you there.
Sure.
Are you looking at a possible stumbling? They're second through their 5th games. They host Florida State, they host Air Force, they're at Cincinnati, and then they play Texas, their annual traditional battle against Texas.
Well, with
It's tough 4 games in a row.
But with Florida State's defense, like I said, allowed 427 yards per game. Even if they improve by 75 yards, which is about as much as I've seen a team improve, you're still looking at 350. Oklahoma's got one of the top defenses in the country. Offensively, the 2 schools are close. Ponder's up there along with Landry Jones, but Oklahoma's at home. I think they win that game by double digits. The Air Force game, as we saw in the bowl game with Iowa against Georgia Tech, if you have an excellent athletic defensive front 7, you can shut down the option, especially if you have time to prepare. It's the 3rd week of the season, so they have time to prepare in August. I think they shut down Air Force's option. And plus, Air Force's secondary doesn't face a pass attack when they practice. They practice against the option. Landry Jones, Ryan Broyles, I think they pick them apart. The next game is at Cincinnati. Once again, you go back to the Big East. You go back to the fact that 2 years ago when they met, the final score was 52-26, and that's because since he returned a couple kicks for touchdowns, we can keep it close. There's a large talent advantage. The game's in Paul Brown Stadium, not Cincinnati's home stadium. You have a new head coach at Cincinnati who's just learning the players' strengths and weaknesses. I think they win that. And with Texas, go back to switching from the spread option to the pro-style attack. Defenses are close, large edge offensively. So I think they can win all 4 of those games comfortably.
Coming next, the SEC and the Big Ten as we continue with Phil Steele and the 2010 College Football Preview on All Bets Are Off right here on STL.